Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. I am Sadia Hussain, lecturer, Department of Finance and Banking. My dear students, today I am going to discuss Chapter 1, Finance and Business Finance. This is lecture number 3. First one is financial manager deals with two basic types of decisions. First one is income or financing decision, and second one is expenditure or investment decision. Income or financing decision. Income decision is the process of fund collection. Income decision mainly means the process of fund collection. That means the scope of this decision covers selection of the alternative sources of fund and taking financial plans by analyzing the advantages and disadvantages of these sources. Generally, to cover up the current expenditure, fund is collected from short-term sources, and to cover the current expenses, fund is collected from long-term sources. For the purpose of fund collection, it is collected through own capital and arranging loan from different sources. Large companies may gather capital through selling shares. Finance decision is concerned with the mix or composition of the sources of raising the funds required by the firm. In other words, it is related to the pattern of financing. In finance decision, the finance manager is required to determine the proportion of equity and debt, which is known as capital structure. There are two main sources of funds: shareholders' funds and borrowed funds. Second one is expenditure or investment decision. Expenditure decision deals with investing the funds in various projects. These decisions relate to selection of assets in which funds are to be invested by the firm. Investment alternatives are numerous. Resources are scarce and limited. They have to be rationed and discreetly used. Investment decisions allocate and ration the resources among the competing investment alternatives or opportunities. The effort is to find out the projects which is acceptable. Investment decisions relate to the total amount of assets to be held and their composition in the form of fixed and current assets. Both the factors influence the risks the organization is exposed to. The more important aspect is how the investors perceive the risks. The investment decision results in purchase of assets. This decision basically divided into two broad categories: long-term investment decision and short-term investment decision. Apart from these two important decisions, there are also some other decisions, which is purchase of how amount of raw materials is suitable and from which sources this one can be collected. That means this type of decision is called current investment decision. How much amount of cash reserve should be kept for daily expenses is another important decision. Then last one is dues payment for the sources of fund is another decision. If fund is collected through bank loan and other loans like bond, debenture, etc., then payment of certain amount of interest at the right time is an important responsibility for the financial manager. In the same way, if fund is collected through selling of shares, then earning profit at the expected rate and distributing dividend are other important things to be considered by the financial manager. Then, evolution of finance. After the Industrial Revolution of 17th century, production technique becomes more complex and the production process attains its excellence through specialized and divided processes. To sustain in a market competition, finance related a concept and its use become essential. Pre-1930 decade. This time, a trend of unification began among the companies of the USA. Financial managers had to identify a framework about which company should be unified with which one by examining the financial statements of the companies. 1930. Tendency of unification did not get much success in USA. Many of the companies unified in the past decade turned into bankrupt in the next decade. At that situation, how these losing companies can be reorganized to protect them from bankruptcy was a special responsibility of the financial managers. From that time, fund collection through share selling started. 1940s. Necessity of liquidity was the main concentration at this time. Finance did that responsibility by ensuring well-planned cash flow with making a budget of cash flow. 1950s. In this decade, finance was involved in evaluating the most suitable investment project by using different mathematical analyses. Main activity of finance then turned to profit maximization by increasing sales and decreasing expenditures through suitable long-term investments based on long-acting forecasting. This trend is considered as the traditional trend of finance. 1960s. Modern finance started its journey from this time. Finance started giving priority in capital market. Shareholders are the owners of a company, so maximization of the shareholders' property or the market price of shares became the main objective of finance of this time. Concept of risks in finance makes us understand that risk increases with the increase of profit. So, profit increase may not be desirable all the time. 1970s. Era of computerized activities started in this decade. This not only changed the production techniques but also through changes in business finance. Finance is now mathematics based. Most of the financial decisions are mainly based on complex mathematical calculations, and the tendency of making these calculations very effectively in computer got special popularity. 1980s. For expansion of business and sustaining in the competitive market system, finance evolves in a new outlook by changing its previous roles. Efficient distribution of capital among alternative projects of the company and calculation and analysis of income of these projects were the main activity of finance. Last one is 1990s and beginning of modern finance. World Trade Organization revealed itself in this decade. Barriers of export and import started to decrease worldwide. This time, finance achieved internationally. In one hand, investment decisions of finance considers where in the world production and selling of which product called achieve profit. On the other hand, the scope of finance also includes in its consideration which capital market of the world is of what type and from which sources fund collection will be profitable. As a result, finance is an applied field of solution in the financial management of a business organization, which has developed in combination with accountancy, economics, and some other financial subjects. My dear students, that's all for today's class. If you have any kind of questions or queries, you can call me or we can discuss it in our Zoom class. Allah Hafiz.